What happens when a CEO follows one of her employees home, only to uncover a truth that shakes her to the core? Angela Carter, a hardworking single mom, was quietly working double shifts just to put food on the table for her 2 children. One evening, she humbly asked her boss if there were any leftover meals. Curious and concerned, CEO Linda Morgan followed her, and what she found changed everything. Inside that tiny apartment, Linda saw more than struggle. She saw strength, sacrifice, and the silent suffering of someone who kept showing up with a smile. That night lit a fire. Company policies were rewritten. Wages raised. A mother's voice was finally heard, and it sparked a wave of change felt far beyond the walls of the warehouse. This is a story of empathy, dignity, and what happens when the powerful finally listen to the quiet. If you love these types of stories, then don't forget to comment down below from where you are watching. You can support us by liking this video and subscribing to our YouTube channel. It was nearly midnight, and the fluorescent lights inside Thompson Manufacturing buzzed overhead like a tired sigh. The machines clanked and roared with their usual rhythm, and the scent of oil, metal, and tired bodies hung in the air. For most of the workers on the late shift, this was their second or even third job, another stretch of hours spent making ends meet in a world that didn't always seem to care if they broke down in the process. Among them was Angela Carter, a young black woman in her late 20s with deep eyes that told stories her lips never shared. Her brown work boots were scuffed and old, her navy uniform too loose from weight she'd lost over time. Her movements were methodical, her focus unwavering as she packed another line of shipping boxes. She barely spoke to anyone, not because she was rude or distant, but because time and energy were precious. Every second of that shift was measured against how much food she could buy, how many bills she could pay, and whether her 2 kids, Malik and Grace, would have enough school supplies this month. Angela had been working double shifts for nearly 4 months. Morning to night. Sometimes, she caught just a few hours of sleep on the city bus between her factory job and a part-time cleaning gig at a downtown hotel. But tonight felt heavier than most. Her legs ached. Her stomach growled. And as she stood in front of her workstation, her fingers trembled slightly, not from cold, but from hunger. Across the floor, something unusual was happening. Linda Morgan, the CEO of Thompson Manufacturing, was walking the floor in a plain trench coat and sneakers, completely unannounced. She was a tall woman in her early 50s, with a commanding presence softened by the faint lines of life around her eyes. Most of the employees didn't recognize her without her usual power suit or entourage. But Linda had made a personal vow this year, to stop making decisions from boardrooms and start listening on the ground. She'd been hearing murmurs about workers sleeping in break rooms, skipping meals, about a woman named Angela who never left the plant. Whispers about someone working so hard, it made the supervisors uncomfortable. Linda had initially chalked it up to exaggeration, until she saw Angela herself. She watched her quietly from a distance, noting the way Angela rubbed her back between shifts, the way she winced just slightly each time she bent down. But what struck Linda most was Angela's silence. That kind of silence didn't come from shyness, it came from survival. It came from people who'd been taught that asking for help was a luxury they couldn't afford. As the clock struck 12:08 a.m., the night shift officially ended. Workers gathered their bags and headed for the doors, exchanging tired waves and quick goodbyes. Angela, still holding her stomach discreetly, veered off toward the empty cafeteria. Linda followed at a distance, curious. Angela peered through the glass doors of the cafeteria, hoping to see leftovers. Maybe a sealed sandwich, a forgotten piece of fruit. She stepped inside and asked the janitor, an older man named Jerry, if there was anything left from earlier. Her voice was low, respectful, and so full of dignity that it broke Linda's heart. Just something small. Anything's fine, Angela said, glancing down, embarrassed. Jerry frowned apologetically. Sorry, Angela. Everything's been tossed. Angela nodded. Thanks anyway. Linda stepped forward then. Angela. Her voice was soft, unsure. Angela turned, surprised. She hadn't even seen the woman behind her, and certainly didn't recognize the CEO. "Yes, ma'am. I overheard you just now," Linda said carefully. "Why didn't you just ask for help? If you needed something to eat." Angela looked away, shifting her weight. There was a pause, a heavy one. "I don't like asking," she said finally. "It's not how I was raised. I just needed something to take home. For my kids." That last sentence hit Linda like a gut punch. For my kids. She hadn't said it with self-pity or expectation. It was simply the truth. Her truth. Linda, who had grown up in a wealthy Chicago suburb, had worked hard to build her career, but she had never known hunger. Not like that. Her children never had to wonder if there'd be dinner. She didn't grow up being told no, because the money was gone. And now, standing in front of Angela, she felt something shift. A sense of discomfort. Of privilege. "Let me drive you home," Linda said gently. "It's late. You shouldn't be taking the bus this time of night." Angela's eyes widened. "Oh no, ma'am. I couldn't ask you to do that." "You didn't ask," Linda said, a small smile softening her expression. "I'm offering." Angela hesitated. She wasn't sure what to say. In her experience, people in power didn't do things like this. They didn't notice folks like her. And when they did, it was usually to scold or dismiss. Not to offer rides. Finally, she nodded. "Okay. If you're sure." Linda walked with her to the employee lot, and they got into her modest sedan. The drive was quiet at first. Angela gave vague directions. She didn't want to admit she lived in the Lower East Side, a part of town most executives avoided after dark. But the deeper they drove, the more Linda realized just how far removed she had been from the lives of her employees. They passed shuttered businesses, broken streetlights, and homes that leaned with time and neglect. Angela stared ahead, embarrassed, but Linda's expression didn't change. Instead, she drove slower, taking it all in. When they finally pulled up in front of Angela's apartment building, an old brick structure with faded paint and a cracked walkway, Linda's breath caught in her throat. The porch light flickered weakly. The screen door hung crooked. And yet, from the upstairs window, she could see a child's drawing taped to the glass, a rainbow, a house, and 3 smiling stick figures. "Thank you for the ride," Angela said softly. Linda turned to her. "Angela, would you mind if I walked you in?" Angela looked at her, surprised. But something in Linda's voice told her it wasn't pity. It was something else. Something real. She nodded slowly. "Okay." What Linda was about to see inside that home would shake her. Not because it was messy or broken, but because it was filled with something she hadn't expected to find. Strength, dignity, and a kind of quiet love that didn't need to be spoken to be felt. And in that moment, everything Linda thought she knew about success, struggle, and the American dream was about to change. Angela led Linda through the cracked front gate and up the stairs of the tired old building. The narrow hallway smelled faintly of damp carpet and years of struggle. The walls were lined with peeling wallpaper and dim light bulbs that flickered like they were deciding whether or not to keep trying. As they approached her apartment door, Unit 2B, Angela paused for a second, turned back toward Linda, and gave a small, apologetic smile. "It's not much. But it's home," she said. Linda gave a quiet nod. She didn't say anything, but something inside her felt like it was holding its breath. Angela unlocked the door and pushed it open slowly. A warm light spilled out from inside, revealing a modest, cozy space. It wasn't the broken, hopeless place Linda had imagined. Yes, the carpet was old. Yes, the furniture was worn and mismatched. But it was clean. And it radiated love. On the floor, 2 small children looked up from a blanket fort built between 2 worn-out couches. A boy about 10, with big, curious eyes, and a younger girl, probably 6, clutching a book to her chest. "Malik, Grace," Angela called softly. "Mommy's home." They ran to her instantly, hugging her waist. Angela bent down to kiss their foreheads. Malik looked up at Linda, unsure. Grace peered from behind her mother's legs. Linda gave a small wave. "Hi. I'm a friend of your mom's." Angela looked down at her kids. "This is Ms. Linda. She gave me a ride home from work." The kids nodded shyly and returned to their fort. Linda's eyes scanned the room, the space heater buzzing faintly in the corner, school papers neatly stacked on a side table, and a single framed picture on the wall, a woman in a nurse's uniform, smiling with the same eyes as Angela. "That's my mother," Angela said, noticing Linda's gaze. "She passed away a few years ago. She raised me and my brothers all by herself. Always told us, no matter what, you keep your dignity and take care of your own." Linda swallowed hard. She must have been a strong woman. "She was," Angela nodded. "Everything I do, it's because of her. I want Malik and Grace to grow up knowing they're worth something, even if the world tries to tell them different." The kids disappeared into the back room, and Angela motioned for Linda to sit down. She pulled a small pot from the stove, filled with rice and a few vegetables, clearly stretched for another night. She looked over her shoulder. "I wasn't kidding when I said I needed to bring food home. This is all we got tonight." Linda sat in silence. The couch creaked slightly beneath her, and she realized she didn't know what to say. The woman in front of her wasn't just an employee. She was a mother, a provider, a fighter, and no one at the company, not even Linda, had ever seen her as more than a name on a shift list. Angela placed 2 bowls in front of the kids, then sat across from Linda with a tired smile. "Sorry I can't offer you anything," she said. "You're probably used to fancy meals." Linda chuckled lightly, more out of discomfort than humor. This is real. And it's more meaningful than anything I've had in a while." Angela raised an eyebrow. "That's kind of you to say." Linda looked around the room again. Really looked. The walls might have been worn, but there was joy here. The fridge door was covered in school drawings and stickers. A Bible sat open on a side table, next to a folded-up grocery list. Despite the cracks and worn paint, this home had a soul. "Angela," Linda finally said, her voice softer now. "How long have you been working double shifts?" Angela took a deep breath. "About 4 months now. Rent went up, and daycare costs more than I make in half a week. My ex disappeared a year ago. I don't get any support. But I can't let the kids feel that. So I just do what I gotta do." Linda nodded slowly. "Do you ever get time for yourself?" Angela smiled, but there was sadness behind it. "Sometimes when they're asleep, I sit right here and read. My mama used to read to us. I guess it's how I remember her." Linda leaned forward. "Why didn't you ever ask for help?" Angela met her eyes. "Because asking doesn't always work when you look like me." The words hung heavy between them. Angela continued. "People think we're lazy, or irresponsible, or looking for handouts. I work hard, Ms. Linda. Every single day. But no matter how much I do, people still see my skin before they see my worth. That's just how it is sometimes." Linda's throat tightened. She had always considered herself fair, unbiased. She gave scholarships, hosted diversity panels. But she had never followed one of her employees home. She had never witnessed the quiet sacrifice, the unseen battles. In that moment, Linda realized that good intentions weren't enough. Policies didn't fix hunger. A company bonus didn't make up for a system that left people like Angela fighting alone. Angela looked toward her children, now asleep in their room, their small faces peaceful. "I don't need sympathy," she said softly. I just want a fair shot. I want to work hard and know it counts for something. Linda stood and gently reached into her coat pocket, pulling out a business card. You'll hear from me soon, she said, placing it on the table. Thank you for letting me in tonight. Angela picked up the card, puzzled. Why? She asked. Linda smiled, not out of charity, but from newfound clarity. Because no one should work that hard and still go to bed hungry. And because what you showed me tonight. That kind of strength deserves to be seen. As she stepped out into the cold night air, Linda felt something shift in her chest. A door had been opened, not just to Angela's home, but to a truth she could no longer ignore. And she knew, with absolute certainty, she couldn't go back to business as usual. The next morning, Linda Morgan sat in her corner office, the city skyline stretching behind her, untouched coffee sitting cold on her desk. She'd barely slept. Angela's quiet words from the night before echoed in her mind. I just want a fair shot. Linda had built Thompson Manufacturing from the ground up. She had survived cutthroat boardrooms, market crashes, and hostile takeovers. But last night, sitting on Angela's old couch, she realized something that all her business wins had failed to show her. She hadn't been paying attention to the people who made her company run. She called her assistant in. Get me the heads of HR, operations, and finance. In my office. Now. By noon, the room was filled with department heads, all looking slightly confused. Linda stood, no PowerPoint slides, no formal agenda, just conviction. Last night, I visited the home of one of our employees. She's been working double shifts for months, raising 2 children alone, and she still barely has enough to feed them. There was a stunned silence. I want to know how that's possible, at my company, under my leadership. The HR director shifted uncomfortably. We've always offered overtime opportunities, and we have optional support programs, but... Linda cut her off. Optional isn't the same as accessible. If someone like Angela Carter can work 16 hours a day and still go to bed hungry, then we've failed her. And we're going to fix it. She laid out a list she'd scribbled that morning, on the back of an old envelope. 1. Mandatory wage review for hourly staff. 2. Meal programs for employees who work beyond standard hours. 3. Emergency childcare grants. 4. Transportation vouchers for second and third shift workers. 5. Anonymous reporting channels so employees can ask for help without fear of judgment. This isn't about charity, she said, her voice firm. This is about dignity. About making sure the people building our success don't get left behind. Some execs nodded slowly. A few looked skeptical. But none dared argue. Linda ended the meeting with one clear order. Angela Carter is not the exception, she's the example. And from now on, we build around her, not above her. Later that week, Angela sat at her workstation, head down, sorting inventory like always. She hadn't heard anything from Linda since that night and assumed it had been a one-time act of kindness. She didn't expect miracles. Life had taught her not to. But just before her shift ended, her floor manager walked over with an envelope. Angela, this came down from upstairs. Said it's for you. She opened it cautiously. Inside was a formal letter. Effective immediately, your base pay has been increased by 25%. You are also eligible for our new transportation and childcare programs, starting Monday. Thank you for your continued dedication and strength. It was signed, Linda Morgan, CEO. Angela stared at the paper, then read it again just to be sure. Her hands trembled, not from exhaustion this time, but from relief. The kind of relief that made your knees go weak. She sat down slowly, blinking away tears. For the first time in a long while, it felt like someone had seen her, not as a burden, not as a number, but as a human being. And while the fight wasn't over, Angela knew one thing for certain. The world didn't change overnight, but sometimes, a single night could change everything. The changes didn't go unnoticed. Within 2 weeks, word had spread throughout the company. New wages, new support programs, and whispers about a night when the CEO followed a worker home. Rumors floated through break rooms and warehouse aisles. Some thought it was just PR. Others said Linda had finally grown a heart. But the ones who mattered most, the hourly workers, the janitors, the cafeteria staff, they knew. And they felt it in their bones. Someone had finally listened. But while the workers felt hope, the boardroom felt tension. At the next quarterly meeting, Linda faced a half-circle of sharply dressed men and women. Stockholders, legal counsel, CFOs, the usual suspects. The chairman, Douglas Crane, gray hair, sharp eyes, cleared his throat. Linda, we've been reviewing your recent decisions. These new programs are generous, but they're expensive. The board is concerned about long-term margins. Linda leaned forward, her fingers laced together on the table. You're worried about profits. I'm worried about people. Profits are people, he retorted. Without returns, we lose investors. We shrink. Everyone suffers. Linda paused, then reached into her briefcase. She pulled out a small frame and placed it in the center of the table. It was a drawing. Crayons. A picture of a house with 3 smiling stick figures, 1 tall, 2 small. Written in messy letters, "Thank you for helping my mom. I visited an employee named Angela Carter 2 weeks ago," she said. She was working herself to the bone, going home to 2 kids, and still couldn't afford dinner. This was drawn by her daughter. The boardroom fell silent. "I'm not asking for applause," Linda continued. "But I am asking for this company to have a soul. We can afford to take care of our people. We've just never chosen to." Crane frowned. "We've always followed market standards." Linda's voice didn't waver. "Then it's time we set them." Another executive chimed in. "But why now? Why her?" Linda stood up. "Because when you sit in a penthouse too long, you forget what it's like in the basement. Angela reminded me. And if we lose money treating people with dignity, then maybe we've been building success the wrong way." The room was still. No one responded right away. But they saw it, her resolve. The kind that couldn't be talked down. And one by one, a few began to nod. Hesitant, but moved. Crane finally exhaled. "We'll monitor the impact quarterly. But you have our support, for now." Linda nodded, and with that, she picked up the crayon drawing, slid it gently back into her case, and walked out. It had been 3 months since that cold night when Linda followed Angela home, and the company felt different. Not just in policy, but in spirit. There was more laughter in the break room now. Less fear when someone had to ask for time off. A quiet dignity returned to workers who had spent years thinking they were invisible. And though profits didn't explode, something else did: loyalty. Productivity rose, absenteeism dropped, and most surprising of all, so did turnover. People didn't just show up for paychecks anymore. They showed up because they mattered. Word got out. News outlets picked up the story. CEO revamps company after following single mom home. The headline went viral. Local TV stations came knocking. Other CEOs reached out to Linda, curious about her approach. A few mocked it as emotional overreach. Others wanted to copy it. But Linda wasn't interested in fame. She was interested in follow-through. Meanwhile, Angela's life was beginning to shift in ways she hadn't dared to dream. For the first time since her ex had left, she was able to pick Malik and Grace up from school instead of relying on a neighbor. Her grocery bill no longer required sacrifice. She even started taking a class, online, after bedtime, working toward a degree in business management. It was something her mother had once told her: "You got a brain, baby. Don't let the world make you forget that." One Saturday morning, as the kids played outside and Angela reviewed her homework, her phone rang. It was a number she didn't recognize. "Hello," she answered cautiously. "Angela Carter," came the voice on the other end. "This is Rachel Turner from the Urban Women's Leadership Conference. We read your story, and we'd love for you to be a guest speaker at our event next month." Angela blinked, stunned. "Me? I'm not a speaker." Rachel chuckled. "You're a mother. You're a fighter. You're a woman who changed an entire company without even realizing it. That's exactly who our young women need to hear from." Angela swallowed hard. "Okay," she whispered. "I'll do it." That next month, standing on a small stage in a community center gymnasium, Angela told her story. Not the polished version. The real one. About working double shifts, about folding laundry at midnight, about staring at empty cupboards and still smiling at her kids. And about the CEO who didn't just listen, but acted. By the time she finished, half the audience was in tears. The other half stood in applause. Backstage, Linda met her with a hug. "You were incredible," Linda said. Angela looked up, eyes shining. "I didn't know I had a voice." Linda smiled. "You always did. The world just needed to quiet down long enough to hear it." They stood there for a moment, shoulder to shoulder. Two women from different worlds, now bound by one night, one decision, and one ripple that refused to stop growing. And outside that gym, the world continued turning. But for everyone inside, something had shifted. Because when one woman speaks up, another finds her courage. And when one leader chooses people over profit, everything changes. A full year had passed since that night, since Linda followed Angela home and witnessed a reality that redefined her understanding of success. What started as a single act of curiosity and compassion had bloomed into something far greater. Thompson Manufacturing had become a national model for corporate responsibility. Not because of some glossy marketing campaign, but because it truly walked the talk. And that year, for the first time in the company's 40-year history, the annual leadership luncheon wasn't held at a private country club, but in the very warehouse where it all began. The space had been transformed. Long white tables draped in linen, fairy lights strung overhead, a small stage at the front. But the most noticeable change wasn't the decor, it was the guest list. Managers, supervisors, engineers, janitors, cafeteria workers, forklift drivers, everyone had a seat at the table. And at the center table, wearing a simple but elegant navy dress, sat Angela Carter. Her children sat beside her, dressed in their Sunday best. Malik wore a clip-on tie and tried not to fidget, while little Grace beamed with pride, swinging her legs under the table. They didn't fully understand what was happening, but they knew it was special. Their mom was special. Linda took the stage, applause rising from all corners of the room. She waited for silence, then began. "1 year ago, I followed one of our employees home. Not because I doubted her, but because I realized I didn't know her. That night changed my life. And it changed this company's soul." She turned toward Angela, who now wiped a quiet tear from her cheek. "This woman taught me what true leadership looks like, not from the top down, but from the bottom up. She reminded me that every paycheck has a story, every badge has a heartbeat, and every tired smile at the end of a shift deserves respect." The room gave a standing ovation. Linda continued, "Today, I am proud to announce that Angela Carter has accepted a new role as our first ever employee equity advisor. She will sit in on executive meetings, contribute to HR policy, and ensure every voice, from every floor, has a seat at this table." Angela slowly rose, hands trembling slightly as the crowd roared. She stepped onto the stage, her heels clicking softly on the polished floor. "I don't know all the fancy business terms," she began, her voice steady, "but I know what it means to feel small. I know what it means to give everything you've got and still come up short. And I know what it means when someone powerful sees you and helps you stand taller." She paused, then looked out over the crowd, her co-workers, her family now. "I used to think I was just surviving. But now I know I was building something. A future. A message. And maybe, just maybe, if more people lead with their hearts, We'll stop letting people like me fall through the cracks. Grace tugged at her dress as she stepped down, whispering, "Mommy, you're famous." Angela laughed, kissed her forehead, and whispered back, "No, baby. I'm just finally being heard." As music played and the celebration continued, Linda and Angela stood side by side. Two women who had changed each other's lives, and in doing so, changed countless others. Because sometimes, it takes one long shift, one empty kitchen, and one brave woman to remind the world what dignity really looks like. And sometimes, it takes a CEO who's willing to follow, in order to learn how to lead. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this story, be sure to check out more of our videos. We have plenty of inspiring and powerful stories waiting for you. Don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss an update. See you in the next video.